everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Allie Olson. I am a yoga teacher, and this is Louie and his toy. Apparently he'll be joining us today. So my background is primarily in alignment yoga, so I like to focus on proper alignment of the body within the different poses and properly warming up the body to get us ready to properly and safely practice different, maybe more intense stretches or asanas. And in light of recent circumstances, we can't really hold yoga classes in person anymore, at least for the time being. So we thought in offering this video, we could provide you guys with some tips and tricks on how to safely practice these poses at home. And when we're in yoga classes, just some tips and tricks to bring into the class as well. I'm getting really distracted with my dog. So today we'll be focusing on pigeon. Is going to be our ultimate pose that we'll be focusing on. And pigeon is one of my favorite poses because it really helps relieve my lower back. And now he's getting his tail. Get your tail. Get it. Get your tail. Good job. Get your tail. All right. It's really good for relieving my lower back pains. I have some sciatic joint like kind of dysfunction, tightness, as well as some hip flexor tightness, and that's just from sitting all day and having poor posture. So pigeon is a really great tool for me to practice opening that area up. It's also kind of a very vulnerable position for our knee to be in because it can just feel a little bit tweaky. So if this pose, when we get to it, feels at all tweaky for you, ease out of it, maybe try to address the alignment, and then reassess. Like maybe it's for you, maybe it's not, maybe it's just today it's not for you. Whatever it is, just listen to your body. So just a couple things overall that we want to be paying attention to in this pose is having our front foot flexed no matter what angle our shin is at, or rather our knee. We want to make sure that the front foot is flexed, and by that I mean we want to have it like this, not pointed. So when we're in the actual pose, it will look like our toes pulling towards our knees. We're not pointing them back, we're pulling them towards our knees. And then the other thing that we want to pay attention to is keeping this front knee in alignment with that hip. We don't want our knee going out either direction. We want to keep that knee in line with the hip and our front foot flexed. Keeping that front foot flexed protects the tendons in your knees. And technically, I guess this pose should be your shin is parallel to the top of your yoga mat. It's not possible for me to do that just because of the way that my knees are, and maybe hips, or maybe it has other things to do. But if that's not your flexibility level, then absolutely no worries. Keeping that shin closer to the thigh and closer, your heel closer to your pelvis, will make it a little bit less intense. And then the other thing we want to be mindful of is keeping our hips pointed forward and not dumping our weight into either side, and I'll kind of touch on that more when we're practicing the actual pose. So I've kind of structured today's class a little bit differently. We'll be doing kind of a warm-up flow to get into pigeon, and within that we'll be doing Warrior 1 and kind of spending a little bit more time on Warrior 1 than maybe some of the other ones, just to give some tips and tricks in that pose, because that pose is really good for just overall like grounding, strength training. It's like if you practice it for a long time, like your muscles will start to shake. It's a rather hard pose. So it's good for training, it's good for grounding, toning your legs, and shaping your abs, keeping your pelvis in the neutral position so we're not like arching our lower back or like rounding our lower back. We're keeping our abs engaged, and that helps build stability within the core. And it's also a good chest opener, which is one of the things that we'll also be focusing on in pigeon. So with that, we will come to a standing, and we'll come into a Tadasana. So our feet are right underneath our hips, and our toes are spread nice and wide, pressing through the four corners of the feet. Engage your thighs so your kneecaps are raised. And then draw your navel into your spine so your pelvis is raised a little bit. Your lower back is nice and protected, but your butt's relaxed. And gently pull your shoulder blades back, feeling that opening up in your chest. And just take a few deep breaths, feeling into your body, welcoming it into this space. And we'll begin by inhaling and interlacing our fingers behind our back and opening up the chest, feeling our shoulder blades slightly pull together, the clavicle opening and expanding, inhaling all the way down into the lower abdomen, feeling the breath expand, and then exhaling, coming back into a more neutral position. And then again, inhaling, taking a big breath, opening up the chest, feeling the abdomen open up, the breath move along the side body into the lower back, and exhale, come back. And then one more time, inhale, opening up, nice and wide, exhale. And then we'll come and just shake our arms out and shake our body. Get some movement in our body. Shaking is a great, fantastic way to release extra stress, extra tension that we keep stored in our body. Animals do it naturally. This is something that like is so innate to us, and yet we just don't do it. So shaking out all of the stress, all of the tension, letting our shoulders hang heavy, our arms kind of move around, our feet not getting stuck to the ground, just shake. And inhaling, feeling that movement. Whoops, sorry buddy. I'm sorry buddy. And then slowly come back to a standing into Tadasana. Again, make sure your feet are anchored into the ground. Noticing the feeling that the movement gave your body. And then on that next inhale, interlace your fingers the way that feels wonky. If you don't know what I mean by that, interlace them like just the natural way without thinking about it, and then switch your fingers over one so it feels like they're just a little bit off. And then again, inhale, open up that chest, expand that breath all the way down the abs. Inhaling and exhaling, coming back to a neutral position. And then again, inhaling, opening up the chest, expanding the abs. And exhaling, coming back, placing those hands on the hips. Take nice big hip circles. Using those hands to kind of guide your hips. Feeling the movement, trying to make that movement as wide and expansive as possible. Trying to create some movement and some breaking apart of stagnant energy or stuckness or whatever it might be in the lower back. Go ahead and switch directions. If you find a spot that feels good, you can stay there. And then find your way back to the center. And placing those hands again on the hips, go ahead and press one hip out. And inhale, bring that other arm up above your head so you're making a nice big crescent shape. Inhaling, feeling the stretch all along your side body. Coming up, exhaling, placing that hand on your hip, inhaling the other hand up and pressing that hip out, expanding that side body. And then coming back, and maybe a couple more hip circles. And then bring those arms nice and wide, stretching out. Palms facing outwards, thumbs facing up, open up that chest. And then exhale, go ahead and give yourself a big hug. Linking your breath with your movement, cross your elbows over one on top of the other as you kind of give yourself a big hug, tapping on your back shoulder blades along your spine, moving with your breath, however that feels for you today. And then keeping those arms nice and wide. Palms facing back, thumbs facing down, open up the chest the other way, get a nice good bicep stretch. Good. And then bring those hands back on your hips. Take a little bit wider than hip distance stance. If it's more comfortable for you, you can slightly point your toes outwards towards the corners of the mat. If it's more comfortable, you can also keep your feet pointed forward or any variation therein. It kind of is more dependent on your knees, so whatever feels comfortable. And then placing the hands on the hips. And I briefly touched on the down dog video about like imagining your hips as a bowl of water to maintain kind of a neutral spine and keep your thighs elongated in forward folds. So we'll put our hands on our hips and imagine it was a bowl of water and we're tipping it out. So we have a nice big concave in our lower back, and then we pull our shoulder blades together, opening up our chest. So we have now a nice big concave all along our back. There should be no pinching in the lower back. So a nice big concave, and then exhale, lean forward halfway. Keep the tailbone pulled up towards the ceiling, your thighs nice and elongated, the back nice and straight. There should be no rounding in the lower back. We don't want, you can't really see it, we don't want like a rounding there. We want a nice flat lower back, protected, pulled up towards the ceiling. And then exhale, lower down, place those hands on the ground or on the bricks in front of you, keeping that tailbone nice and elongated. Go ahead and exhale, bend the knees and round your spine. Let your head hang heavy for a second. And then inhale, come up, vertebrae by vertebrae, rolling slowly up all the way into a standing. Inhaling your arms all the way up above your head. And then a nice big exhale, folding forward. And keeping that tailbone nice and elongated, pull up, bring your attention to the back of your thighs, make sure those are nice and straight. Lower back should be straight and protected. And then inhale halfway up, walk your hands over to the right side. Exhale, fold down. And then inhale, halfway up, walk your hands to the center, exhale, fold down. And then again, inhale, halfway up, over to the left side, exhale, fold down. And then inhale back to the center, exhale, fold down, turning your attention to keeping your tailbone nice and elongated. Up towards the ceiling, bend those knees. Allow your spine to round, tuck your chin into your chest, and just allow your head to hang heavy, your shoulders to be heavy. And then inhale, slowly roll up vertebrae by vertebrae. Inhaling those arms up above your head all the way. And then a big exhale down, folding forward, keeping your tailbone nice and elongated up towards the ceiling. That lower back is straight. If there's a deep stretch in our hamstrings. Inhale halfway up, come over to the right side. Exhale, set that left hand down on the ground. Inhale that right arm up above so your shoulders are stacked, your wrists are stacked, and your chest is nice and open. Inhale, reaching that hand up towards the ceiling, and then exhale, lower that right hand down to the ground, and inhale, raise your left arm up towards the ceiling. Again, keeping that chest nice and open, your arms stacked, feeling that twist happening in your spine. And then exhale, bring that arm down. Inhale, walk yourself back to the center, and exhale, fold down, pulling the tailbone up towards the ceiling. Inhale, rise up halfway, walk your hands over to the left side, set that right hand down on the ground, and then inhale, opening up that left arm towards the ceiling, opening up the chest, and exhale, set that left arm on the ground. Inhaling the right arm up overhead, opening up the chest, feeling a nice big stretch. And exhaling, placing that hand down. Inhale, walk those hands back towards the center, and exhale down, pulling the tailbone up towards the ceiling. Hi, Muffin. And then again, round, bend those knees, round the back, let the head hang heavy. Use the doggo as a prop. Thank you, mister. And inhale, roll up vertebrae by vertebrae. Inhaling the arms up overhead all the way. And this time, exhale the arms down alongside the body, bringing the hands to the hips. Heel toe those feet out just a little bit further this time. Maybe like, I don't know, 4 to 6 feet, depending on how long your legs are. And then I turn my toes out a little bit more towards the corners of my mat because it's a little bit more comfortable for me, so go ahead and play around with that. And then hands go back on our hips, shoulder blades pulling back together so our chest is nice and open, our shoulders are stacked over our hips, the weight is evenly distributed between our feet, our toes are spread nice and wide, and the weight is slightly pressing through the outer edges of our foot so our arches are nice and raised off the ground. And then shifting your weight from side to side, kind of pressing one hip out and sinking into the inside of the other hip. So you're not pressing it back or forward, you're just pressing it through the center and this hip kind of out. The majority of the stretch should be right here in this inner part. And go ahead and switch sides. So keeping your hips squared towards the front, squared towards your shoulder, will help direct the stretch to this inner groin area. And yeah, so we'll switch sides. And then switch again. And then we'll imagine our pelvis being that bowl of water again and tipping that bowl of water out and leaning forward just halfway, keeping that spine nice and straight, keeping the weight evenly distributed through our feet so we're not rocking backwards, we're not doing this sort of motion, or we're not falling forward. We're keeping our hips more or less in the same line as our heels. So again, not back like that, not forward, which would be really hard to do, you would notice. But then place those hands on the ground in front of you, keeping that chest nice and wide. You can use some bricks here if it's not the most comfortable to place your hands on the ground. So what we're going to do is kind of that same motion as we were doing standing. So shifting the weight in between our feet and the different sides of our bodies. So keeping our hips pointed and our pelvis kind of dropped down towards the ground, so we're not sticking, so we're not like sticking our butt out. We're keeping everything nice and consolidated, and just shifting the weight back and forth, going a little bit deeper each time, noticing the weight going back and forth. My dog is being really needy this morning. Yeah, it's okay. Going back and forth, and then whatever side you find yourself on now, go ahead and sink into that side, allowing that other foot to come up, like, come here, pulling the toes towards your face and opening up through this inner hip. This knee should not be over the toes a lot. If you need to come up a little bit in order to keep this foot down on the ground, go ahead. You can place some bricks there. If that's the case, then you might find it more comfortable to keep this foot kind of down on the ground as a support until you can find it more comfortable to come into kind of a fully seated position. And I'll show you kind of what that looks like on the side. So it's kind of like a half squat. So feeling into the hips, and then inhale, come over to the other side, keeping the toes pulled up towards your face as if it was the ground underneath you right here, keeping this knee more or less in line with the toes. This foot is flat on the ground, and pressing through this hip so you get a nice big stretch all along the inner thigh right here. And then come up, ow, Louie, all the way up into a standing forward fold. Pull your tailbone up towards the ceiling and take one more nice big stretch, pulling the tailbone up, exhaling, relaxing your shoulders down in between your legs. Good, tailbone up, back is nice and protected. Exhaling the chest down, and then bend those knees round the back. And just take a few breaths here, breathing into your lower back, feeling your lower back relaxing. And then inhale, slowly roll up vertebrae by vertebrae. And then heel toe those feet back into Tadasana, so right underneath you. And then place your hands on your hips, engaging your thighs so your kneecaps are pulled up, pressing through the four corners of your feet. Tip that bowl of water out so your lower back is nice and concave. Shoulder blades are pulled together so your upper back matches that concave. Exhale, lean forward. Tailbone should be pointed directly back, same with your sit bones. Imagine someone had a string attached to the base of your spine and the top of your pelvis, kind of pulling that whole entire area up towards the ceiling, feeling that elongation along your back of your thighs. And then exhale, set those hands down on the ground or in the bricks in front of you. And then take a big step back into a down dog. Pressing your chest back towards your heels and lifting that tailbone up high towards the ceiling. And then exhale, come forward into a high plank. Coming down into a chaturanga, tucking the elbows in towards the body. Inhale, come up into an up dog or a cobra or wherever you are at today. And take a nice deep breath, opening up the chest. And then come back into a down dog, tucking the toes. Inhaling, raising the tailbone up towards the ceiling. And then inhale one of those feet, inhale the left foot up towards the ceiling. And then exhale, Bring that knee into the chest and come into a high plank, pushing the ground away, engaging your shoulder girdles. Set that foot down in between your hands. And exhale, relax your hips down towards the ground. Those back toes should be spread nice and wide and the heel pressing backwards, so this back leg is nice and straight and you feel that deep stretch along your hip flexor. This front foot, the toes should likewise be spread nice and wide, pressing through the four corners, and your knee should be right over your ankle. Ideally, your leg is going to be parallel to the ground, so you have a nice supportive 90-degree angle right in your knee. So with that, we'll inhale up into a warrior one, dropping the weight in between our hips, equilibrium between the 2 feet, pressing that heel back, keeping that back leg nice and straight, feeling that deep stretch in our hip flexor area, right on the top part of this hip. The further we sink down, the more I feel it. So holding this, finding that balance, making sure that your pelvis isn't too turned here. So there is a common thing to kind of pinch the lower back to make it easier, but that's not what we want. We want to keep our pelvis in the same position as if we were standing. So our hips should be nice and level, dropping down towards the ground. We don't want to stick our butt out. We don't want to pinch that lower back. We want that lower back for the most part straight. Obviously it has a little bit of a curve because it is the lumbar portion of our spine. So we engage our abs, pull the shoulder blades back. Inhale, you can interlace your fingers behind your back to open up that chest, pressing through the upper part of the spine. And then exhale, come forward. Bring those hands on either side of the front foot and set that back knee on the ground. Untuck those toes and sink into those hips, really sink into those hips. Allow that support to come from those points of contact so your hips can really just kind of like melt towards the ground. And then rock back, keeping this front foot on the ground. You can put a little blanket underneath that back knee if it's uncomfortable. So keeping this front foot on the ground, we have a big stretch in our shin and our calf, in our calf. And then rock back a little bit more, pulling the toes towards your face. And then rock all the way forward, placing those hands again on either side of that foot. And then bring that outer hand on the inside of the front foot. And heel toe this front foot out just a little bit. So we're going to go into a lizard pose. So you can keep your hands here. And if this is enough of a stretch for you, then go ahead and stay here. If you want a little bit more, you can let your knee fall open and you can begin to kind of like fall onto, well not fall, but slowly roll onto the outer edge of that foot so your arch comes off a little bit off of the ground. And then you can further increase the stretch by coming down onto your forearms or even lower if you would like. So we'll take a few nice deep breaths here, tuning into the body, tuning into the areas we feel stretching. Relaxing the hips, relaxing any tension. And then inhale, walk those hands back up underneath you. Bring this knee back in towards the body and walk the foot back underneath in line, back into kind of a warrior one pose. And then tuck those back toes underneath you. Hi, Louie. Go ahead. And press up into a warrior one, placing those hands underneath the shoulders, fingers spread nice and wide. Turn the eyes of the elbows in towards each other. Press the ground away so you activate your shoulder girdle muscle. Pull your shoulder blades down your back, and now you have nice enough space to bring that front foot back all the way into a down dog, or if you would like, you can keep that foot up in the air. And then if you stack those hips one on top of the other, and you can allow that heel to fall back behind you and that knee to bend and get a nice big stretch. And then bring that knee all the way around to your tricep. And then underneath you into a high plank, and exhale that foot back up towards the ceiling. And then again, bringing that knee around towards your tricep as if we were making big hip and knee circles, getting movement and lubrication in that joint. Inhale that foot up towards the ceiling, and then switch ways. So exhale, bring that foot in between the knee in between the hands, and then the knee out and around, up into down dog, and then exhaling again, bringing the knee between the hands. Nice big hip circle movements. And then do one more of these. And then bring that knee in between your chest and come into a side plank. Stack those arms one over another. Stacking those arms one over another. Exhale, bring that foot out and place it on the ground. Pressing through that back hip, opening the chest towards the ceiling, and then exhaling, setting that hand back down on the ground. Bring that knee in line with your hip and flex this front foot. So we're gonna make our way into pigeon. We're in pigeon right now. So this knee should be in line with the hip. This front foot should be flexed to protect the tendons in the knees, and our hips should be pointed forward. So we're not having like a hip pointed back over here. Both of them are pointed forward. And then we also don't want to be dumping our weight into this hip that has some space in between it and the ground. So this area right here, we don't want to be like collapsing into it. We want to keep the weight evenly distributed going down. And again, our pelvis should be not tilted, rather it should be pretty straight, so as to not pinch the lower back. So to aid in not falling into this area right here and hurting our lower back, we can get like a pillow or a blanket and just put it underneath. And then this back foot should be nice and straight behind us, the toes relaxed on the ground, and the knee and ankle in line with the hip. So now that we're all in alignment with our lower half, we'll go ahead and engage our shoulder blades, pull our shoulder blades back, open up our chest and elongating this entire front body. And we can exhale and lean forward, and we can place our forearms on the ground in front of us. We can grab some blocks, whatever is comfortable for us today, and keeping that chest nice and long and open, just relaxing into the pose here. If you're finding that this is a little bit too much for you today, what you can do is you can bring your shin directly underneath your thigh, and in this instance you would have your foot flat, so you would have it kind of, sorry Louie, you would have it kind of pointed because it's right underneath you. The knee is in its normal bending motion, buddy, so you won't have to worry about tweaking the tendons if you're finding it more comfortable to be in this position. And this is a great position to warm up, especially because this pose can be so delicate. So if you find yourself there, then go ahead and sit with that for a while. If not, then go ahead and sit with wherever you're at. And I'm going to try to maneuver this little animal somewhere where I can show you guys what I'm doing. Hi, there. All right. So, in this pose, we'll gently walk ourselves back up so our hands are on either side of that front knee. And again, turning the eyes of the elbows towards each other. Tuck this back toe underneath. Engage your shoulder girdle, engage your abs so your back is strong and your core is strong. Push the ground away, lift this leg up and back into a down dog. And then again, you can stack your hips and open up that, open up your hips if you would like. And then go ahead and bring that foot down and walk out your dog. Maybe get some movement in the hips, wag the doggo's tail. Hi, Louie. You can stay there. And then exhale, come forward into a high plank, eyes of the elbows in towards each other. Hug the elbows in towards the body. Exhale, lower down into a chaturanga. And then come up into a cobra or a high dog, whatever is more suitable for you today. Did I say high dog? And then again, exhale, press the ground away, tuck those toes into a down dog. And then inhale, raise the right foot this time, or whatever foot you didn't do last time, up towards the ceiling. And then exhale that foot in between the hands, pressing the ground away, a strong shoulder girdle. Step that foot down in between the hands, and again, sinking into the hips, pressing that back foot backwards, opening up our hips towards the ground. And then inhale, come up, this time rotating the pelvis so it's dropping down into the more neutral position, engaging our core so our lower back is nice and protected. Our shoulder blades are nice and open. Inhale, engage your fingers, or interlace your fingers the way that feels slightly wonky. And again, opening up that chest, feeling that deep stretch all along this front hip flexor. And then exhaling, placing those hands on either side of the front foot. Allow that back knee to find the ground. Untuck those toes. Sink into the hips. And then rock backwards, keeping these front toes on the ground. Feel that stretch all along your shin, the back of the knee, maybe into your lower back. And rock back onto the heels so those toes are pulled towards your face. And the more you try to pull those toes towards your face, the more you're going to get a deeper stretch in your back of the knee area. And then inhale, rock forward, place those hands on either side of that front foot, and then bring those hands to the inside of the foot and heel toe that foot out just a little bit wherever's comfortable for you. And again, you can allow that knee to flay open just a little bit. You can choose to come down on your forearms if you would like to. Wherever you're at, taking a deep, deep breaths all the way down into the area that you feel stretching. Using that inhale to expand the area, to bring relaxation, to bring space. And exhaling, allowing your body to sink into that space that you just created, furthering that relaxation, that deep stretch. And then inhale, walk those hands back underneath you. Slowly bring this knee back in towards the body, rolling back onto the sole of the foot. Walk that foot back into a high or a lunge position. Tuck those back toes underneath you and press the ground away. Engage your shoulder girdle. Raise that back knee up off the ground, and then bring that back foot or that front foot up high into the sky, into a three-legged dog. Turn the hips, stack the hips on one another, and allow that knee to bend and the heel to fall behind you. And then bring that knee to the outer tricep, engaging your core, your shoulder girdle. Inhale, push the leg back into a three-legged dog, and then around to your tricep, making big, slow, and controlled hip circles, feeling the movement in your hips, opening up that area, and then rotating direction, so bringing the knee in up through the chest first, and then out, around, and then all the way up, before in and out, and up, making sure your shoulder girdle stays nice and strong so there's no tweakiness going on in that area. And then come back into a three-legged dog. And keeping that foot up in the air, exhale, bring it into your chest. Come into a side plank. Stack those arms one over the top of another. Exhale, stick that foot out and place it on the ground. And then inhale, stretch, push your hips up towards the ceiling, opening up along the side body, expanding that chest open. And then exhale, set that hand that was on the ground down. Come back, rolling onto the balls of your toes. Bring that knee in line with your hip. Keep this front foot nice and flexed. Untuck those back toes. And do a quick alignment check and make sure that the knee is in line with the hip. This front foot is flexed. Our hips are pointed forward. And our shoulder blades are pulled back. There should be no pinching in the lower back. This back foot is nice and straight behind us. Inhale, open up the chest. Exhale, lean forward. Being mindful not to dump the weight into the hip that has space between it and the ground. Using our breath to expand our lower back, expand the areas that we feel the stretch. And again, if you would like to do a little bit more of a warm-up for this pose, you can bring that heel right underneath that thigh. And this is good for just kind of stretching that hip flexor if you feel a little bit too much of a tightness going on there. This can be a great tool for helping aid that. And then slowly walk those hands back up. And pressing the ground away. Tuck those toes, those back toes underneath you. Turn the eyes of the elbows in towards one another. Bring that knee up towards the chest and exhale back into a three-legged dog. And then you can stack the hips and open up that hip if you would like. And then bring that foot back down to the ground. And walk your dog. And feeling that stretch, work out your hips. And then exhale, lean forward into a high plank. Turn the elbows towards the body and lower down into a chaturanga. Inhale, come up into a up dog or a cobra, whichever one suits you. Opening up the chest. Exhale, come back into a child's pose. Externally rotating the elbows and the shoulders. So the eyes of the elbows are making their way towards the ceiling. And then inhale, come up into a tabletop position and do a couple cat-cows. And then you can come back into a child's pose and find yourself staying there, resting, or you can continue your practice. Regardless, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I really enjoy and love teaching about alignment so everyone can practice these poses safely and we won't have damage to our vulnerable joints like our lower back and our knees and things like that. So with that, there's actually a couple more things that I wanted to touch on. One of them that I forgot to mention while we were doing these poses, one of them is in this pose. While we're in this pose, it can be a great tool for us to externally rotate our hip and our thigh using our hands. So to do that, we just kind of like massage the hip away from our body, so backwards, back away from us. And by doing that, we set the hip into the hip socket and the hip joint. So we're just kind of aiding in that. So just massaging that leg backwards, imagining the ball head of the hip tucking its way into its socket. And then coming to the other side, obviously we would do that to the other side as well. But the other thing that I wanted to touch on was pigeon, and this is kind of an advanced variation, which is why I didn't include it in the actual class. But if you're looking for something to kind of up your practice with it, then bringing your foot, I think this is called like king pigeon or something like that, but bringing this back foot up. And we want to be careful here because this can lead to a lot of lower back pinching and compromised alignment. So we don't want to fall into this space that has been created underneath the hip that's in front, nor do we want to fall the other way, right? So we want to keep the alignment and the weight proper in our hips. So we can place one hand in front of us, like in front of our knee, ideally in line with the shoulder, and then raise this back foot so the knee is on the ground, and then we can flex the foot and grab a hold of the ankle. If that's not the most comfortable, you can keep this foot pointed and grab more towards the toes. If you would like, you can also grab a yoga strap or something and attach it to the back and hold on to it this way. You can hold on to it that way, but you want to keep both of your hips pointed forward. You don't want to fall into this kind of this sideways facing. The sideways can also be a really good stretch, but it's not technically correct. I'll do it. It's great. To do the sideways, we would want to try to make sure that our hips are in line with our knees and our shoulders are over our hips. And then this front foot is strongly, strongly flexed to keep our balance. And then again, we pull that toe or the toes towards our body. But this front foot or this front hip also has to stay down. So I recommend people keeping both hips pointed forward and then just bringing this foot backwards and keeping everything pointed in alignment forward. It's the safest and the most proper way to do the stretch that I would say. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope to see you all in person very soon. And